My name's Hamish Peary, and I'm an Associate Director here at the Royal Court. I'd love just to say thank you all for coming and welcome you to our Big Idea Day of Action. And we've purposely tried to break down that concept of Day of Action into lots of small, bite-sizable things that we can all do and think about in our lives in reference to climate change. So I just want to give you a quick overview of the day. Some of you are familiar faces who may have been involved. Some of you may have already been downstairs and heard a 10-line play written by from 8 to 14-year-olds. Please just go and ask the actors which play you want to hear, and they will pick a playwright for you to listen to their plays. Upstairs we have the landscape, which is radio plays or headset plays by international playwrights looking at their landscapes. We've got a playwright from China, from Russia, from India, looking at the landscapes of their world, writing about that and how that climate change affects it, while you sit out, stand out and look outside our landscape, which is, of course, Sloane Square and all those lights. There's a really interesting conflict there for you. We also have, during the matinee, we have Afro Retro doing a clothes upcycling workshop, so please look into that. Then we also have a transport workshop later on this afternoon, I think about 5 o'clock, so please go along to that. And then, really importantly, we've got another one of these about how can theatre be green? So the same question we've asked about, can business ever be green? We've got a really exciting panel of theatre, of artists and green practitioners to hear their opinion of that this afternoon with a brilliant chair, Paul Hanley. So please do get your ticket for that. I think they're all free now at this time, so do come along. But without further ado, I would like to present our panel for this afternoon, which is Can Business Be Green? We're really excited to have a very interesting array of people who I'd now like to introduce. Simon Graham from Commercial Group. John Hill from Bioregional. John will be chairing today's event, which I'm very grateful of. And here we have Olivier Lawder from Futerra. And Daniel Turner from CDP. So, Tom, over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. So I think a good place to start is just to give a bit more detailed introduction. So if you want to start from you go.
Hello, yes, my name is Simon Graham. I'm the environmental strategist at a company called Commercial Group. We are a business services enterprise. And my role is to head up environmental strategy and sustainability across the whole group.
So I'm Tom Hill. I work for Bioregional Development Group. It's a not-for-profit based in London that helps communities and businesses to become more sustainable. Ollie?
Hi, I'm Olivier Lawder. I work for a company called Futerra. We're a communications agency, but we work exclusively in sustainable development. So we use the same sort of principles that are used to market and advertise mainstream products, get people excited and engaged, but we use those principles to sell sustainability and get people interested in doing the right thing and doing the right behaviours.
Okay.
Hi, so Daniel Turner. I'm Head of Disclosure at CDP. We're a not-for-profit charity working globally with companies and investors and governments and also city authorities to gather information on climate change and other environmental impacts and then provide that data back to the market in a standardised and comparable format. So both companies can benchmark themselves and investors can weigh up the pros and cons of each company's strategies for who they'd like to invest in the future. So it's providing information to the market that wasn't really there in that standardised format before.
So I think the format for this session is that we're going to answer questions towards the end of the session. We'll leave about 15 minutes or so for that. And we're just going to ask the panel their views on whether business can be green. But to start with, I'd just like to do a bit of a poll on the audience and just get people's sense of do you guys think that business can be green? If you could raise your hand and if you think businesses can actually be sustainable, please do. Okay, so quite a wide range of support that business can be green. So just to open it up to the panel, so if we start with Ollie, what's your take on whether businesses can be green?
Yeah, I think inevitably yes, a business can fundamentally be green, but we need to see business not as an isolated thing. It's something that is interconnected within society. It's connected to its suppliers, the people who make the raw resources, the basic stuff that it's going to use, and its customers, its consumers, the people who buy and use the stuff that they're making. And it's only when business works in partnership with these two other groups that you actually get a real progress towards businesses being green and being able to significantly reduce their environmental impact.
Okay. Daniel, what have you got a take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I also agree. I think they can be green, and any business that wants to survive in the longer term is going to have to be. The climate is obviously changing, the economic situation is changing. If a company wants to still be in business in the future, they're going to have to become much greener than they are now. I think there's a couple of things just I was reflecting on. It's climate change and the impacts of it. It's a much bigger issue than just carbon emissions. Obviously, that's what the play is about and what we're here to talk about today. But a truly green company has to also consider all the natural capital impacts it has, whether that's water or forest commodities as well. They all come together. And so, if you're good in just one area, that doesn't really cut it. You have to be across all those areas. And I think you need to be investing in the future and in reductions, particularly around emissions, in order to set yourself up for that future that's going to come. So they've got a lot of work to do, but it's certainly possible.
Okay, thank you. And Simon, have you anything to add on that?
I think there is an interesting aspect to green business in that in many cases people consider a business being green purely for financial reasons. And I would suggest that there's a much broader business case for being green. And I think the success of green business is in the way that they can communicate to their customers, the way that they can engage with staff, they solve all kinds of supply chain issues by taking a green agenda is incredibly powerful. And I would argue actually that good business has to be green to be successful. And in the emerging economies, we are seeing that happening already.
So one thing I'm kind of wondering myself with this is that are businesses being green? So the environmental movement's been active for at least 30 years, and yet, say, carbon emissions are rising super exponentially, and so there seems to be something's not going quite right. So if we're going like that, and we actually need to be going like that, what's going wrong? And so are businesses being good? Again, Ollie?
That's me. All right, sounds good. They're starting, aren't they? I mean, they're taking baby steps and starting to get their heads round the problem. There are fundamental conflicts, sometimes between being green and being a business. A lot of companies have forgotten why they were first established, what they were in business to do originally, and they've reduced their purpose to making short-term profit as quickly as they can. Being green, being environmental often takes a longer-term view. It takes investment, it takes probably structural change within the business. Often it takes moving your consumers to a new way of thinking about engaging with the product you're making. And when a company has lost its raison d'etre, it's what it was primarily set up to do, then it can have real trouble being green. And I think this is one of the reasons why we see slow progress, is that most large companies have forgotten what they are in business to do. And knows what they are in business to do is to create something that is genuinely useful normally. Be it running shoes for athletes who want to perform to the best of their ability, or climbing equipment, or soap that cleans our hands and keeps us healthy. And this disconnection from their real purpose is what I believe slows and stymies the green agenda within the private sector.
So Simon or Daniel, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of companies, so there's thousands and thousands of companies, tens of thousands of companies in the world. There's a smaller group of leading companies who are at the forefront, kind of riding the wave, being the early adopters, they're essentially experimenting and seeing what works. They're investing lots of money, and from some of the research we've done at CDP, we have definitely seen that companies that we rate we essentially score all the companies that respond to CDPs. It's basically a questionnaire that companies talk about the risks and strategies, their emissions reduction targets and so on. We give them a rating, and we've consistently found that from the companies that come out at the top of that rating, they can financially outperform the market from general indexes. So I think it kind of discredits the notion that being green means you're losing money or you're not going to be making profit. The business case is clearer, but it's still only in a smaller group of leading companies that are kind of showing the way for everyone else to catch up. But the rate of catch up is by no means fast enough from the pack, if you like, to catch up with those leaders.
Great. Anything to add?
I think that's absolutely valid, and I think there is a lag, but I also think there is an incredible acceleration happening at the moment, that we could easily be pessimistic by looking historically at what's happened, but actually to look forward, we can see there's a lot of positives. As an example, there are technologies now that used to be cutting edge, very hard to find, only available to a very small minority of organisations. They're now becoming mainstream. And those technologies will help reduce energy consumption or improve efficiencies dramatically. And I think there's also a groundswell of interest in those alternative business models like circular economy models, which will drive that consumer change that can help the companies which want to do things to feel relaxed and comfortable in opening those new markets. And I think we are close to having that moment where there's a tipping point where we'll see an acceleration. So I'm optimistic that that business can be that agent for change which we need.
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well in general, but at the same time this is going to be a period of disruption. I mean, one of the better things about capitalism is that it can kill off businesses that are out of touch and businesses that aren't prepared to adapt. If you take the sort of global environmental villains, if you like, of the fossil fuel industry, you know, and I talked about purpose, now a company sees itself, those companies could lead a sustainable agenda. They're full of highly intelligent and educated engineers. They can use the same skills to build an oil rig, to build offshore wind farms. They can use the same skills to extract resources, to manufacture and make solar panels and distribute those globally. But the fact is, they're so stuck in their self-description of, we are an oil business, that instead of doing that, they go off and go, oh, the ice caps are melting, let's see what we can dig out of the ocean over there.
And it's an interesting point you raised that capitalism allows companies to be killed off. Do you think that the mechanisms are in place to enable them to do that? Because in many ways it seems that a lot of companies are getting away with it.
Yeah, in theory and at its best, yes, capitalism should see the old irrelevant businesses die and the new more relevant ones thrive and survive. But we know we have far more complicated problems. We have political capture of business, and this is the downside, of course, is when businesses get so powerful they get embedded and ingrained within the system. But I don't know, I still think we can give them a good shock, and there's plenty of bright people, and I'm particularly optimistic about the next generation coming up, the millennials, and their mindset, their attitude towards the world. I think it's a group of people, if any group of people were going to cause real trouble and come up with some great innovation and want to strive to change the world and make it a better place, I think it's the generation that is struggling at the moment, but is going to really surprise us in the future.
And I think companies that want to recruit that talent are going to have to be on top of their game in this aspect in order for clued up sort of 20-somethings who are looking for a career. They're not going to want to work for a dinosaur company that they're probably predicting might be out of business in 20 years' time. They want to be part of a change for the future, and so companies that are progressive and developing the solutions, and they're out there in great numbers. Some of them are startups, and there's some fantastic projects coming through that. Other bigger sort of industrial companies, the majority of their business is from making wind turbines or making renewable energy equipment. They're going to be the successes of the future, and they'll be the ones that people will want to work for, because they'll recruit and retain that talent, I think, and that'll be something to happen.
And one of the things which I found quite interesting recently it's beginning to get onto the agenda is this idea that of like a carbon budget, and that we were essentially running out of time, in the sense that if you wanted to keep temperatures to 2 degrees, I think we'd something like 565 gigatons of carbon, but the the amount that's actually on asset sheets, so fossil fuel companies have found, is about 5 times greater than that. So that's all locked up in our stock market. And on the trajectory that we're currently using carbon, we're going to run out by about 2030. That's a really short time frame. And so if emissions are rising like that, and we need them like that, can we actually turn it around in that space of time?
Interesting point you touch on around the stranded assets. A lot of the value of these companies is locked up in carbon reserves or oil reserves that can't be burnt. If there's going to be any hope of limiting to 2 degrees without really significant carbon capture storage technology just being completely standard and rolled out at every refinery all over and every place around the world. So I think that how that argument goes, that's raised a lot of interest in the financial markets. People who've never really considered this as an issue before, a mainstream financial issue, are suddenly questioning, actually, is my pension worth what it looks like it's worth? If half of the value, of a lot of these companies that make up the FTSE or the S&P 500 is based on reserves that can't be burnt if we're going to stay to 2 degrees, what impact is that going to have on a dramatic shift in, potentially it leads to policy changes where companies are forced to act to significantly change. I mean, we've been working on a project with WRI, WWF around science-based targets to help companies, depending on what sector they're in, the allowance and how much carbon they're responsible for is vastly different from the heavy manufacturing industrial sectors to the more service-based sectors. But we're working on this kind of methodology to work out what their path must be to get down to 80% reductions by 2050 and how they can actually start to account for that and put it into their business models. But that's a kind of new thing. Even though we're doing it ourselves, it's obviously overdue. But it would have been better if these things could have started, 10, 15 years ago when the debate was still, the facts were kind of as they are now. But hopefully that would provide more of a plan for how companies can actually get to 80% reductions, because it's a monumental task. But certainly there's ways to do it, and definitely they should be starting that journey now.
So, on that sort of basis, what's your sense of I think divestment has been in the news a lot. Have you got any thoughts on how effective that sort of approach would be in kind of penalising companies that aren't playing ball? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few things recently. I think it was the University of Glasgow might be one of the most recent ones. Their pension kind of fund, the endowment fund, has divested from oil stocks, and I think that again is a signal, a very strong signal, that if it was going to be something that more people in the citizens in the public sphere were aware of these type of things, and that there are things there for them to be able to make a direct influence on the speed at which these changes can happen, then any publicity for those sort of ideas is I think the organisation 350.org has done great work. They had that article in Rolling Stone, their founder. There's a lot of more interesting, different viewpoints coming into this debate, and they appeal more to the mainstream audience, and so that will hopefully have a knock-on effect, so that people are becoming more aware and can be more activist themselves.
Okay, so what are you seeing as being? Is your sense, cumulatively, is your sense that we're on track? Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction, or is more of the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing early signs of a much bigger change. We talked about a little bit before about, it's going like this, and we need to bring it down and start turning the corner. I think the idea that we're going to very gradually reduce emissions year on year from now to 2050 is not the way it's going to happen, quite frankly. I think we're going to see a period of very rapid change, a period of a great deal of disruption, both in civic and in the business world. And I think there are key issues such as the carbon bubbles, this idea that oil companies' value is based on resources, stocks they have in the ground that ultimately they won't be able to burn if there is a serious global agreement to meet the targets. And that is going to change the financial system radically. If the markets genuinely believe that the world is not going to accept that those resources are going to be burned, you are going to see such major change. I mean, the last couple of years of recession are a laugh based to what could come from that. But on the flip side, there will be a dawn after that dark, and what we need to be doing now is getting our minds ready, getting our businesses ready to see us through that period, so that we come out of it with a much better model and a much better way of organising business, organising society, our role and relationship as citizens to one another and to the companies we work for and the companies that provide us service. And what we should do now, my university professor said to me when I was saying, what should I do when I graduate? I want to make a difference in the world, what sort of thing should I go for? And he said to the class, you can either work in the hospice or in the maternity ward. You know, there is nobility in both. And he sort of said, you can either help the old companies die slowly and with as little impact as possible, or you can work for the new, interesting startups, the ones that are going to show the new way and shape the new world. And I do think there's nobility in both. I do think you can make a difference with both of those industries. But we need to be paying great attention to what are the new models, what are the new ideas that are going to thrive in that disruptive space and really grow and become the employers and service providers of the future. And that's where it gets exciting for me.
I think it's touching on the point you made about if that kind of radical change, it's quite an exciting idea rather than just incremental change. And I heard a story of shareholders went to a meeting and it's an oil company, and they asked the executives there how they were planning on dealing with the carbon budget and the risks associated with that. And their response was, actually, we see that as a negligible risk, because we don't believe the governments will actually enforce these climate targets. And that's it's a really interesting thing about what are the obstacles that are preventing essentially preventing movement on this at the moment. So why aren't businesses already sustainable? So that's a very difficult question.
Well, actually, my view is that actually the vast majority of the things holding back is because there's a leadership challenge. That actually organisations do have leaders who want to make those transformations, but they're held back from doing it by a number of other things which are impacting them at the moment. And I think the focus we've had for the last few years on businesses trying to make out what business as usual should be like is holding back a lot of the leaders who want to make those transformations. And those aren't necessarily just millennials. There are a lot of leaders in business who want to make their organisations and their companies more sustainable. So I think actually what we need to do is break down those barriers, which are stopping the leadership doing what they're supposed to do. And those might range around the quarterly report, for example, and the necessity to report financial gain on such short time frames. It might be the case that organisations need the support from the civic community to say, yes, we are prepared to take a hit in the short term because we've got to see long-term benefits. Or it might be simply consumers making the rational, sensible decisions and not being misguided by a short-term view of that's got a nice flashy flash on it, while actually we should be doing the right thing. And I think that leadership is there and needs to just be released.
I would add, what businesses and investors want is a kind of long-term certainty. They want to be sure that if they're going to make big capex investments in new plant, new machinery, new buildings, they don't want that to then be illegal in 5 or 10 years' time. At best uneconomical, at worst illegal, and has to be written off, for billions and billions of dollars then sort of written off. That has happened in a number of cases where a company has kind of lost, particularly more around water, because water is going to be exacerbated by climate change. A lot of companies see water as a very 1 to 3 year term major risk. Climate change is still perhaps seen as a longer 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years risk. But it's very easy to lose the license to operate if you're taking the water for a mine, say, that would be the local community water. Hopefully the local community would win that battle, and in the first few cases we've seen they have, and the companies had to write off that investment. So I think what the businesses really want to see, and probably what has held it back to a certain extent, is just the lack of a long-term policy signals, regulation, global regulation. There's no use just the UK doing some regulation or France. It has to be global. Obviously there's all the myriads of problems trying to arrange that, but it kind of looks like the signals for 2015, for Paris, for the COP meeting in 2015, the signals are positive. There, a couple of weeks ago the EU announced some new targets that will be binding. There was a lot of debate about getting in an at least 40% reductions by 2030, and there was, the debate in the heads of state meeting was around including at least, and that was so that you can very well go beyond that, but that gives a clear signal for the EU at least.
Yeah.
Just last week, China and the US announced new, tougher kind of announcements on what they're going to do about carbon emissions. America's had doubled for the next 20 years what they've got to reduce by. China said they would peak in 2030. That could be taken a couple of ways, because obviously their peak is going to be so enormous by then that it's probably about half of the global budget. So whether that's actually feasible or not, but the very fact these kind of announcements are coming out a year in advance of the COP meeting is a positive signal, when after the disappointment of Copenhagen. This could well be the long-term certainty that the companies and the investors need to set their plans for the next 10, 20 years.
So from the CDP's point of view, those commitments that come from Europe and America and China, what's the sense of how ambitious they are in terms of, do they put us on the trajectory that we need to get to in order to solve this issue?
I mean, they put us more on it than we are currently, which is take what you can get at least. It's potentially not, whether it will be enough, it's hard to say, because we don't really know what massive radical shifts could come, in the interim. But it's certainly more than we've had to date, which I think you have to take that and the positive from that.
Okay, Ollie,
I think just to contrast with this, it's very easy to sort of to start to feel like a bit of a passenger when you sort of listening to the kind of global debates and context of what's this massive nation's commitment taken, and it's quite you can feel sort of quite small and sort of one of 7 billion people in the world, and what can I do? I can watch it as a spectator, but what you've got to remember, and at the risk of sounding a little bit like Russell Brand, is that all of these structures are made by human beings. We put them in place, we can break them, we can change them, we can reshape them and remake them. And I think, just to contrast, the global policy level with the individual action level, which is a key theme for today, it is all within our potential to change. And one of the things that's quite inspiring about working in the sector we work in is that you constantly meet people, even within the biggest of and sort of dinosaurish companies, who genuinely want to make a difference. And I fundamentally believe that everybody wants to go home at night and say to their friends, their family, their loved ones, that they've done something meaningful at work today. That their little bit of, the big machine was worthwhile and is counting towards a global good. And you'll find people in pharmaceutical companies who feel very much like that. We're solving global medical problems. You'll find people in oil and gas companies who've convinced themselves that they are, solving poverty in the third world by creating cheap coal. People want to believe these sorts of things. And I think that's one of the roles for leadership, for good communications, that can really help people channel that energy, that desire for self-worth and importance and significance in the world in a good direction. And this is something we can all do. We can do it by inspiring our friends, our children, our family and so on, and really just cultivating optimism and this idea that these problems can be solved. They are within our power. We just have to start acting and work as much as we can towards a common goal of a better future.
Great. I guess I'll try and wrap up so we've got time to ask the audience. I think people have touched on the different levels. We talked on kind of government, we talked on businesses, we talked on kind of consumer patterns. Just a sense of what people think on the panel here that the average member of the public Joe blogs or Joanne blogs could actually do to take this forward. Good to know.
One of the things I think is interesting, the concept of can a business be green? Within there's so many different ways a business can relate to the public. All of us in this, all of us in this room will relate to a large number of businesses in a lot of different levels. We could be indirectly or directly shareholders in a company. We could be indirectly or directly a customer. Many of us are employees of organisations who might not just be the company itself, but a customer or a supplier to another company. And I think those lots of levels of engagement. What I find exciting is a business can be green in what it is, what it produces, how it works, how it relates to its customers and suppliers, but it also can be in the way it relates to its employees. And I think it's very exciting at the moment to see so many new initiatives which companies are doing, which enable employees to become more sustainable. And I would argue that one of the great things we can do as citizens, as members of organisations, is to enable those companies to do those simple things and slightly more complex things, to encourage employees to do the right thing. So if you are in a company that doesn't yet have showers for people who cycle into work, or doesn't have secure bike racks, or other facilities that cyclists need, those are the kind of things we should be fighting for within our own organisations. There's wonderful initiatives going on. There's, for example, Kimberly-Clark and 3M, various other companies in the United States are now providing subsidised and supported solar panels to employees. Because for many of us, we might want to have green energy at home, but it's beyond our grasp, maybe because of technology or because of finance. Companies can support that for their own employees, and that's very exciting. So that's one area where I would say getting engaged with, at whatever tier it is, and whatever engagement level, to say we can use those resources to enable other people who connect with the company, whether it's another employee or another customer, to gain that which we want.
And just last question, have anybody on the panel got a sense of how would we know, like, when we've got there? What's the end goal really in each of your different spheres?
I'm just going to quickly go on the point before, just
to
finish up
go on that one.
But I think there's as citizens of the world, we give the companies the power they've got. We buy their products. You may feel you're forced to buy those products because you need it for a certain reason and there's not really an alternative. But I think by companies, especially with social media now, the instant a brand can be damaged kind of globally instantly by one scandal, or it can be significantly enhanced by kind of being good on the environment and actually meaning it. There are a number of companies who really are walking the talk and doing what they say, but I think as citizens, as consumers, not to label you as merely consumers, you're citizens first and foremost, but you are also consumers voting with your wallets. Do a bit of research into the companies whose products you buy. Have a look at what their long-term strategy is and vote with your wallets. You can help to push this movement in the right direction. And whether that comes down to things as well, look at what your pension fund is investing in and ask questions of the trustees of that pension fund to kind of respond to it and show that you're concerned enough to start asking these questions and taking a more active role. So I'd say that I just wanted to put that in there.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think just on the consumption one, the role as consumers, I think, start treating yourself with respect, really, in where you spend your money. There are products out there that are trying to take the piss out of you. Cheap, rubbish things that are meant to engage your most primitive parts of your brain and going, ooh, that's shiny, I'll have it. Don't fall for the trap. Give yourself some, a bit of self-respect about where you spend the money that you have hard earned and hard won. Don't be a sucker, basically. And that is part of, really voting. It's not about it shouldn't be at all about sacrifice or compromise. You shouldn't actually having to be ending up with something worse. You should be ending up with something better, something that's made with care and craft, with respect and consideration for the person who's going to buy and use the product at the end of it. So, don't see this as hair shirt, I must get sandals and go and live in the forests. It's about living the life you want to live in the best possible way and being that example of the way the world should be. And how will we know when we get there? When we're not talking about it anymore.
Wow. Nice. I can imagine you're doing a sucker becoming a nice brand of t-shirts or something.
Well, yeah, sustainable, organic cotton and manufacturers.
Maybe a good time to open up to the audience a bit. Any questions from the audience for the panel? So the gentleman over there in the jacket. If you could speak up because there's no mic.
Yeah. If the problem of the carbon sources is locked up and not exploited happens, then investors are going to look for other places to invest. Is that, do you think, going to put pressure on other types of businesses to give, to inflate their values in whatever ways, but actually in part by giving poorer quality service to customers? I would cite one example, and I hesitate to name its name. It's a big retailer and household goods, food retailer that is claiming that it's doing lots of things to become very green. But as a consumer, tiny example, I reckon the quality of their men's knitwear over the years has gone right down.
Okay. So could you specifically, what's the question?
Well, the question
Should they
is...
speak with forked tongue?
Okay, that's quite good.
No, okay. Are other businesses, if they're going to become attractive to the investors are going to want to have, pension funds are going to want to have businesses that they can put money into and invest in.
Yeah.
Is that going to actually put pressure on other types of business to give poorer deals to the public?
Okay. Panel got a position on that?
So, if are these other companies going to go pursue profit over quality in order to attract the new investment?
Right.
I would say that if the pension funds go through a shock like that, they'll be looking for security first and foremost. And largely the reason pension funds invest in oil and gas is they believe it's a safe bet. Pension funds are one of the most interesting financial spaces because they're one of the few that take a relatively long-term view. They are looking at return over a lifetime. So there are a lot of people in the green space who are trying very hard to make the case that fossil fuels are not nearly as safe and secure as you believe, and actually you want to trade off your risk by investing in renewables as well. No, I don't think so. I think there will be an appetite for stability and certainty, and as I'm sure you can explain, strong environmental practice equates very closely with steady long-term returns.
Yeah, I think companies that can prove that they're managing, and being good on sustainability and environmental issues is not easy. You have to first measure, get your facts straight, see where you can make savings, see where you can change the business to improve things. But it doesn't happen overnight. You have to put some work into it. And so I would hope that companies that have gone through that to get themselves to a position of being recognised as doing good on this wouldn't then kind of throw it away for a short-term return. They're going to be wanting to stay at the top for longer. All the investors are going to be looking for a long-term bet. And I'd probably go a bit further and say pension fund, their fiduciary responsibility is in perpetuity almost, because every set of new pensions that come online, they all have a 50-odd year lifetime. So that's their model. They want to keep that going, and they're going to want a safe pair of hands that the companies are run by. if you're good on environmental issues, it's often seen as a good proxy for other management kind of issues, and if you can deal with a complicated issue really well, it kind of speaks well for your business as a whole across other issues as well.
So the lady in the turquoise top?
Touch briefly on legislation.
Yep.
How do you feel about these rules that are going through, and already gone through Asia about the global trade agreements, where
Okay.
companies can be sued for not allowing profits to come from Asia. And should we probably counter all of what we're talking about?
Sorry, I didn't hear that last bit. So the trade deals going through Asia, I think?
Have been through and are now going through Europe,
Yeah.
which will allow companies to sue
Yeah.
if their profit is under question or in danger. You know what I'm talking about.
Is it TIPP?
Yeah.
TITP, yeah. Personally, for me, I find that quite a scary prospect.
Because that goes against everything we've been talking about long-term profit, and basically knocks everything.
And I mean, that's where you'd hope to see real integrity from some of the companies that wouldn't play that card.
But
You know,
it's
if
law
it's-
and
yeah.
everything we see.
So
Yeah.
I just repeat the question. So trade laws going through at the moment, maybe coming into Europe, that allow companies to sue if their profits come into question. That was the question put to the audit panel. So any thoughts from the panel on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hideous law. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's terrible. The idea, basically, as I understand it, is that if the government brings in a policy, say like a public smoking ban, a tobacco company could sue the government for it potentially affecting its profits. So, I mean, that's, as I understand it, what this idea is about, and it's terrible. I mean, I'm always kind of slightly torn by these hideous things that come along. You know, part of me is deeply outraged, and then this kind of secret anarchist in me sort of says, like, this is going to bring around change even faster. People are going to be so pissed off with this blatant piece of crap that they're not going to stand, and the sort of the apathy. I'm really excited by the increase in political interest in the UK at the moment. I think the best thing to come out of the Scottish referendum has got us all thinking again and potentially interested in politics again. And, you know, I think there is growing disquiet and growing unrest, and I think this sort of self-serving corporate nonsense is only going to accelerate the change that's inevitably has to come. So that's my kind of secret, you know, kind of thing, kind of going, well, fuck it, let's put it through. It's going to upset so many people that it's just going to tear itself to pieces. And I think we have a system at the moment that can only tear itself to pieces. And one of the things that we spoke about earlier before we came on, and one of the kind of elephants in the room, is that at the very top of the system we live in is this single driving idea. So we talked about a system how consumers and business and suppliers are all kind of interconnected as a web, but also in this system it's driven by rules and regulations, laws, policies, taxes, these sorts of things. But at the very top of the system, the thing that directs it all is an ideology, a single idea, a kind of purpose or goal. And the one at the top of our system is growth. The increase in GDP means that is our fundamental measure of success in the society. Because the idea is, if GDP goes up, standard of living goes up. Now that's true up until a point. They're very closely correlated. If you don't have enough money to buy food and your wealth goes up, you're no longer hungry. If you need healthcare and your wealth goes up, you can afford it. But when you get past the point of your basic needs being met, the graph starts to break, the connection breaks, and GDP continues to rise, consumer spending continues to rise, and no one gets any happier. So that is the fallacy under which we are living. We are living under a fundamental system goal that was great up until, gosh, I let myself down with my history, but maybe the middle of the century, when most people's needs were fundamentally met. We need to change that goal. We need to set that new metric of what this society is fundamentally going for. And that is the only way we will get real change that will trickle down through the rest of the systems and structures and business models that we have.
Okay. So, small job for us to sort out.
Small job, but it can be done.
Can I ask a question? Because you've been quite general, which is great, but where is the optimism? And I mean by that, you're talking countries who are culturally responsible, citizens who are culturally responsible. corporations are probably responsible to carry all of that in us. Ideology driving it. Where are the hopeful signs? Leaders and companies that are showing up to do this. We work in this space, so please name some. Name some that you feel are leadership.
Yeah, I mean,
good to hear.
we at CDP4, they're in New York about a month or so ago. They do a climate week, and that the climate group we worked with them on that and came up with a series of 6 declarations that we were asking companies to sign. Excuse me, just consult my notes what they are. But it was you know, they commit to reduction targets that will limit global warming. They will have a strategy to get 100% renewable energy. They'll remove commodity-driven deforestation from the supply chains. There's 6 of them. Company Philips Electronics, they signed up to all 6 of them. Unilever signed up to 5 of the 6. But that list of those companies is on our website. You can get to it straight from the front page. And there are a number of companies. I mean, we get 5,000 companies respond to our questionnaire. All that information is available free of charge on our website, which is cdp.net. Go and have a look. I have bought a box of reports that are just on the box office. I hope it might not be enough for everyone, but there's at least 50 reports in that box that people can take away and have a look. So there are companies doing it, and we put some of these companies up as leaders, and you know, invite anyone to go and look at what they're saying, and you know, take them to task or reward them with your business if you think they're doing well. But certainly from that perspective, I would say Philips, the Dutch company, Philips Electronics, they're really on top of this across all the levels. They're walking the talk quite significantly. Not the only one, but Unilever as a sort of UK Dutch brand is good. So if I was going to pick a couple of examples, they're probably the 2 that would come first.
B&Q are achieving absolute reductions in their carbon emissions as well, rather than just relative reductions.
I have one small one, Patagonia, who make outdoor equipment, one of the only companies to persuade its consumers not to buy their own products. and teaching their consumers how to mend, how to repair, how to maintain. There's a lot of interesting things going on in the apparel business, which is a terrible environmental footprint. Jeans companies especially, who will basically sell you a pair of jeans for life, and they will mend and repair, and you can send it back to them and they will replace it. Whole other models. There's a clothing company in America which actually you rent your clothes, you no longer buy them, and they send you new clothes every month. But the fact is those clothes are cleaned and kept in use. And when you start shifting to that model, I mean, my family used to rent all their electronic equipment in their home, the TV, the radio and so forth. Those business models are actually much better. Services, renting things, rather than buying something one-off. Because what you do then is you switch the burden of responsibility back onto the manufacturer. Because the manufacturer's going, hold on a second, I'm going to get this thing back in a couple of years or whatever. When I get it back, I want it to be worth something. Either I can recondition it and rent it out again, or I can take it to pieces and there's some value left in it. So models that are moving from sell once and then forget about you to let's partner up on this and rent and provide a service have the potential to be much more sustainable.
I just want to also mention one other thing. There's lots of big brands out there who are doing good things, but there's also lesser companies. And in each local community, you'll find there are good businesses which are not necessarily got the marketing budget that someone like Philips has, and all the reporting expertise, but they're actually doing really good things. And I think we need to not lose sight of the fact there are good companies locally who are striving to do the best they possibly can, and working with those as well. And a related point, there's also some excellent leadership, because although there are good organisations which are adhering to certain standards and reporting good things, there are others who are not doing the greenwash, the eco-bling. They're actually looking at new ways of doing stuff, and that's exciting. And I would argue that right now we're at a place with the environmental agenda where probably the US was in 1961 when they were looking to send somebody to the moon.
Can you give some examples of those?
It's very hard because every local community's got them.
No, but each of the companies that are doing.
But innovation space, I can talk about commercials experience. We've just been involved in a huge project to run on hydrogen power. Now, for many years, hydrogen power was a fuel of the future and never was going to happen. And it's been used as a stick to beat the development because it wasn't going to be possible. But actually we were able to work with a number of UK-based organisations who said we will work to make hydrogen a reality. And over the last 18 months, 2 years, we've rolled out now one of the largest hydrogen fleets in the world. And that's a UK operation, working with UK partners to deliver something properly. And if you look out occasionally on the streets of London, you'll see a hydrogen-powered van driving around. That's only going to be possible if we work together and see not the environmental challenges as simply challenges which we have to overcome, but rather opportunities to do something new and exciting.
So, one actually, building on that, one question for Daniel. Are you aware of companies that actually are achieving absolute reductions in their carbon emissions? So rather than just saying, our resource, our carbon intensity will go down, but we're still going to increase?
Yes, so we, one of the questions in the questionnaire that goes out there is for companies to detail how much they have invested in emissions reductions activities, we call them. So that could be energy efficiency, could be changing plant, whatever. What that's done to their, against the business as usual, how much it has reduced their absolute emissions. And some are making, quite the cut-off point to kind of be recognised, qualify for a performance leader is that has to be 4%. You have to be getting 4% reductions that you wouldn't otherwise have got unless you've been making these investments. But looking at across the companies as a total, there's about, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's around 250, 300 have got absolute targets out to 2020 or beyond. A lot of companies would prefer to do an intensity target because it means the carbon's embedded in a product or a process for the metric, whether it's per unit of production, per litre of production, per floor space, is going down. For me, that doesn't get past the fundamental problem of the emissions are still going up and they have to be going down. But there's at least 250 companies who have got quite robust targets out to 2020 and beyond to reduce by, whether it's 5, 10, 20, 50%. They may not know how they're going to do it, but they've put their head on the line and sort of said, we're going to make these reductions. So we know we have to.
Some of them, who are the most kind of ambitious ones and signs that you're seeing?
There is an Austrian utility who's committed to 100% reduction. So it's going to
zero carbon.
And that's what they call Verbund, I think they're called. There's companies like I think Diageo have got a pretty tough absolute target that they want to get to. There's quite a lot of examples, but I just encourage everyone to go to our website and have a look, and you can see what these targets are and have a look at the small print. Some companies may have quite a big target, but what's included in that target isn't the full set of emissions. But there's definitely a number who are going putting their neck out there.
Excellent. From the audience, a guy in the green shirt, I think.
Just interested in expanding again. Have you assessed the air industry in terms of what their targets are for carbon reduction?
The airline. So there are a number of companies. It pretty much covers all this. We split companies into 10 sectors. So airlines comes under industrials, I think, and they're. So I think KLM, British Airways, United. There's quite a few companies do respond. Ryanair surprisingly don't respond. But there's a number of them. They're obviously in a fairly unique category of companies that it's the whole business model is quite emission heavy, and that's potentially something that
They're only doing reduction because of advancements
in fuel technology and things. Yeah, I think it's one of those sort of industries. There's going to have to be something, again, quite drastic happens to the design of an aeroplane before that can reduce too much.
or disaster scenario.
and people just decide, or it not necessarily even a disaster. If people more generally are more appreciative of the emissions that are associated with flying, and don't think that just paying a couple of pounds on top of the ticket to offset it, which isn't really going to make any difference. You know, they have to make the decision to not fly, or you know, take the train, or find some other way, or holiday in England. With our lovely summer.
And on that though, you know, just to slightly return to the issue of the idea of kind of sacrifice and sort of, you know, self-sacrifice, not flying and all these sorts of things. You know, there's a lot to be said for the so-called slow travel movement, you know, and actually slow travel is a great experience in and of itself. We have this idea at the moment that flying is jet setting, and it's what the celebrities do, and we must do it and go to a beach somewhere and it will be lovely and we'll get burnt and drink cocktails. But actually there is a lot of pleasure to be had from, you know, taking a train and moving through the countryside and through the land at a pace where you can recognise the change. And actually it's a lot more restful, it's a lot more fulfilling. You can have a much better holiday without going in the giant aluminium sausage and up into the air and magically appearing in another part of the world, but moving through it and seeing how places and culture and weather and people change a little bit. And, you know, it doesn't, what I'm saying is sustainability doesn't always have to be a path of sacrifice and self-denial and giving up. You just have to look a little bit higher about what is it that I really want and what I really need, and that's rest, relaxation, exploration, culture. And you say, well, how else can I get that? And there are good alternatives already around. I'm done, sorry.
Great.
I'd just like to thank everyone here on that. That's so much really cool. Sure.